ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. First of all, I would like to welcome all of you for our official opening day tonight, and I'll explain to you who we are and how the way we work. So, our International Coptic Organization, we are registered. Sorry if I left the stage. I'd like to be here with all of you. So, our International Coptic Union, we are registered in the United Nations, and also we represent 27 countries around the world. Tonight I'll explain to you two boards, our Australian branch board and our international of our organization board. So, our Australian branch board for International Coptic Union organization, Dr. Medhat Gerges, and General Secretary, Mr. Henny, and we have two coordinators. We have New South Wales coordinator, Mr. Ashraf Ibrahim. Would you mind to stand up, please? So everyone knows you. And we have our South Australia coordinator, Mr. Magdi. Would you want to stand up, please? Sorry, because I know all of you know Dr. Medhat and Mr. Haney, so that's why I don't ask you to stand up, because we have actually, it's our honor to have both of you in our organization. We have the youth coordinator in all Australia, Mr. Peter Ibrahim, and the spokesman, which is me, Dr. Raf. So this is our board. We have activities for last 6 months. I would like to play now some of our activities for the last 6 months. Okay. This one, we joined the Christian Democratic Party for the Syrian and the Iraq Church, Marketplace, and Mr. John Drake, he represents, and Mr. Fred Knight, and this some footage of our event there. We support, and that's one of our needs. We support all the Christians around the world, Egyptian, Syrian, Iraq. This the Australian Heritage Day. It's being organized by Ackner, and Mr. John Drake will mention this in his speech, I think. Was a beautiful day, really beautiful day. That's one of our aims. We open our hand and our arm for everyone to work together to achieve one thing. For all the Christians, that's one thing. And the second thing, we are here in Australia, we part of this society, we are part of this country, so we need to join and work together as a teamwork for better for Australia. Now, our international board, we have Mr. Kamal Abdul. He's our chairman. He's a living historian. We have in France, Mrs. Austria. We have Ramsey. We have Dr. Naguerin from America. Our one as well in Egypt. So if you go through everything here, I'm trying like hard to find some written in English. So this one, this event happened in Egypt last month on the 15th of November. We have big large one, and you can see one represent from Al-Azhar, one represent from Al-Azhar. We talk about the Muslim Brotherhood because we try to force the government, especially here or Europe, as a terrorist group. So our international group, they have already they booked meeting with your parliament on the 15th of December, and they will mention everything there. We represent and we support the Egyptian economic and tourist and our election president, Mr. إفتتاح السيسي. The part of our tonight there is one surprise. Some of our leaders in 27 countries, they make some video to welcome all of you tonight. So now I play these videos, and I hope you enjoy your night. Thank you.
I will stand here later so that you can control the slides. It's written in the book of Hosea, "Blessed be Egypt, my people." The democracy. Democracy in Greek means demokratia, or the power to the people. And in Egypt, a revolution happened on the 30th of June 2013. That revolution was to restore democracy in Egypt. The first bitter revolution in the history of the world happened in Egypt on the 25th of January 2011. It's the Twitter revolution. Unfortunately, after a hopeful start, it was sabotaged and stolen by a group of extremist Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood. This group of Islamists numbered less than 40,000 out of 90 million, got to a ruling position through deception and election rigging, being supported politically by certain countries and financially by international terrorist organizations. Their mandate was to dissolve the borders of the country, aiming at establishing an Islamic Khilafah. Is this exactly what is happening now in Iraq, Syria, Libya, by ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq, and the Levant? Levant historically refers to Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and Palestine and Jordan. To start with, they wanted to de-Egyptianize the sovereign lands of Egypt, including Sinai, Nubia in the south of Egypt, Shalatin and Halayb on the border with Sudan. Their motto was either they rule the country in their own ways and only through their own people, or they will burn the country. Within 1 year, this ruling party descended with Egypt into a state of anarchy and near collapse. Through deliberate actions, they sabotaged safety in the streets and gave the green light to thugs to rob the cars and properties of innocent people. Girls, and in particular Christian girls, could not walk in the street without being accompanied, or they would be subject to abduction and or rape. Killing the Christians in Upper Egypt just because of their religion became a common happening almost on a daily basis. Workers could not go to the places where they work. Factories were closing by the hundreds every day and then sold cheap to members of the ruling Islamist party. The highest rate of unemployment in the history of Egypt was in that period. Collapse of tourism, which was one of the main sources of hard currency in Egypt. They wanted to cover the ancient Egyptian monuments on the belief that they were idols from Satan. They stole our ancient Egyptian artifacts and sold them all over the world. They led to complete collapse of the financial system in Egypt. there was shortage of all basic daily living items as petrol, gas, wheat, bread. There were long queues for petrol never seen in Egypt before. They replaced all the important posts with members of the extremist ruling party who had no qualifications or experience to make them fit for the post. There was worsening quality of life by the day, while the members of the ruling party became richer and richer. And then the only two institutions that escaped destruction under their reign were the armed forces and, in part, the judicial system. This what saved Egypt from this nightmare when the will of the Egyptian people wanted an escape. Egypt, the biggest country in the Middle East, with the 10th strongest army in the world, was on its way to fall in the hands of ISIL. The will of the Egyptian people to have democracy and to return the power to the people was activated again. On 30 June 2013, around 40 million people joined together asking the armed forces to return the power to the Egyptian people. The people of Egypt wanted President Morsi and his regime out. They wanted democracy back. The armed forces listened to the people's voice and answered their request. It was not an armed coup, but people's revolution to return the power to the people. That is true democracy. The wrath of the extremists' revenge fell on the security forces. As they said, they will burn the country. And on the armed forces, and especially, of course, on the Christian Egyptians. We decided that we are determined not to shake hands with hands soiled with the blood of Egyptian martyrs. These criminals and their supporters had to be held accountable for their evil deeds and had to be judged accordingly. We have no political prisoners. We have criminals in prison because they committed criminal acts against Egypt. Egyptian presidential election happened on May 2014, and it was over 90% votes that President Sisi had got the post of President of Egypt. His mandate was to fix the economy, to regain order in the streets of Egypt, to eradicate the Islamist insurgency, to change the divisive culture that developed over the years, to protect the borders of Egypt, and to regain the glory of Egypt. Thank you. What I will tell you that Egypt getting rid of the Islamist regime was described by everyone to be a miracle because it never happened before in any country. They were expecting that regime to stay in Egypt for at least 500 years. Thank you very much.
تحيا مصر تحيا مصر تحيا مصر تحيا مصر.
He's coming back stronger than ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Now, I won't take up too much of your time. I'll keep my words very brief.
Things on local politics. One thing I want to start off with, one of my favourite quotes about politics comes from a lady called Margaret Mead. She said, "Never forget that a small group of determined citizens can change the world, because that's what's always happened in the past." And if I look at what Coptic communities achieved here in Australia over the last several years, I truly believe that we here have done things that have changed the world. If we look at the situation in the Middle East today, there's a real doubt whether after centuries the Christian community can actually survive there. If we look at the situation in Lebanon, we're seeing an influx of something like 1 million plus migrants into that country, all from Islamic backgrounds, refugees fleeing from Syria, which is actually going to tip the balance and put a substantial Islamic majority population in years to come in Lebanon. So whether the Lebanese, after surviving from the civil war for many years and getting on where they actually had the Christian communities there, actually had peace for many years and actually had a future, there's a real question about what Lebanon will be in years to come. If we look across in Iraq with ISIS forces or Daesh on the march over there, whether the Christian communities, what future they actually have in Iraq. We know Syria a complete and absolute humanitarian disaster, which basically leaves us with Egypt. Now, when the Muslim Brotherhood came to power, if they had been left there, the Christian communities in Egypt would not have had a future. And unfortunately, there were many in the West that thought you can simply install a democracy into Egypt and everything will be fine and rosy and it will go on, without looking at and understanding our own history. If we look at our history here in Australia, history of the US, it took us 100 years of British colonial settlement until we had a true democracy in this country. 100 years it took. If we look at the US, the civil war that they had, and the pain and the suffering that they went through to have their democracy, to think that you can just sort of install a democracy in Egypt overnight was just simply foolhardy, but that's unfortunately what many in the West had. That's what gave us the Muslim Brotherhood as a government in Iraq. And of course, first it was sort of frowned upon to say that was a problem. But I think here in Australia during that time, it was the Christian community that were leading voices in saying that the Muslim Brotherhood as a government was detrimental not only to Egypt, but to the entire world. And of course we know the history of what happens. We now have Sisi there, and we have seen again the Coptic Christian community in Egypt having a chance to go on for another 100 years at least. And I think we can be very proud of everyone here that spoke up and used their voices and turned up at marches and demonstrations in Martin Place that really made a difference, because that is what kicked it off internationally. We were the first ones here leading that charge. On the domestic front, the reports when I have meetings with George Brandis, our Prime Minister, and Julie Bishop, the reports that we have the risks of terrorism in this country are real, and the threat level is very high. Unfortunately, there's a minority of people out there that try to downplay these things. It's funny, the very time they sort of speak their voices up and downplay it, we get a reminder of actually some of the evil people that we have out there in our society. We saw the attempted beheading and assassination of a policeman in Victoria only recently. We know there's been threats against our federal parliament. And one thing that I thought I would never see in my lifetime was actually guards outside our federal parliament with long weapons or long arms. I remember as a young kid going overseas for the first times in Europe and seeing at the airport, seeing guards working around with machine guns and long military weapons. And I sort of thought, you know, that was the first time you look at it, you stare at it because it's something that was so foreign to our country. But today, I go for a walk around federal parliament and I see guards with those long military weapons, which are necessary. But we are doing what we can, we are taking steps against it. We've strengthened our terrorism laws quite significantly. What we want to do is firstly crack down on those that go around and preaching hate and try and get young kids, often young kids that are in a little bit of difficulty or in a little bit of problems, and trying to recruit these people into terrorist organisations and giving speeches in these sort of backyard mosques. That's what we're cracking down on. We've now put legislation in that incitement to commit a terrorist act is now a criminal offence in this country, and so it should be. We've also committed our forces in Iraq, much to the chagrin of the Greens in our opposition. We must remember that we've actually been invited by the Iraqi government. The Iraqi government actually want us there. The other week I had some brave journalists come to my office to do an interview for Iraqi TV. I was talking to them after and they said the mere fact that they're here in Australia and have said a couple of things against ISIS, that they are now on a hit list in Iraq for assassination merely through doing their work as a journalist. So there's many brave people there in Iraq trying to stand up for the rights of our Christian brothers and sisters in Iraq today, that we need to give them all the support and all the strength that we can. And to those that sort of think we can somehow sit down and negotiate with these peoples over a latte or a glass of Chardonnay, which I hear these debates in Parliament, I just nod my head at how completely out of touch they are with things in the world. So, with that, I thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight. I wish you all success. It's very, very important that we continue to use our voices, that we continue to stand up for the rights of Christian minorities in the Middle East. Because if we do not do it here, there's just not enough people in other countries around the world to use their voice. So it's very important what we do. It's very important what you do. I congratulate you and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Great pleasure to be here tonight at this function organised by the International Coptic Union. Great to see an Australian branch up and running, making the 28th country in which the union is operating, already recognised as an NGO by the United Nations, to bring Copts all around the world together, to network and also to stand up for human rights and religious freedom for not only Coptic Christians throughout the world. And it's great to see many wonderful people, of course my dear friend and colleague Craig Kelly, what a great fighter this man is. And you know, we've done such wonderful work, spoken out for the Copts and for Christians under persecution in the federal parliament. And of course, Dr. Medhard Gerges, a friend, not for years, but for decades. I've known Dr. Gerges for decades. I think that's fair to say, 30 years. At least 30 years. And Hannah Gayed, of course, always out there doing work. Samir Havashi over here, you know, every fortnight bringing up that newspaper. I know that's a massive effort. I've been in his home, I've seen what he has to do, and so forth. You know, that's a full-time job. And Samir, instead of enjoying his grandchildren, he's out there doing this on behalf of the Coptic community and on behalf of freedom and on behalf of a free Egypt. So good on you.
My voice is so loud, I usually don't leave these things.
And it's also good to see Greg Whitehead here in the Australian Christian Association. Year in and year out, they're doing great and wonderful work. So it's great. Now, look, you know, when I look out at the dear friends here, you know, members of the Coptic community, I know that I'm looking at people who are the indigenous people of Egypt. That Coptic means ancient Egyptian. So I'm looking at people, and I know that your ancestors were the pharaohs of Egypt, and you were the builders of the pyramids of Giza and the great temple of Luxor, and that you're the builders of the Library of Alexandria, the greatest library, the most famous library in the recorded history of mankind. And that your ancestors were pioneers in astronomy and science and mathematics, that you produced the first female national leaders in the world, in the history of the world. That happened in Egypt under the Copts. And all of these wonderful, wonderful things. But, you know, there's something to me that is even greater about the Copts. And that is that despite this illustrious history going back 7,000 years, you know, that even today, the people in the world are in awe of, and in awe and respect of. and that is that you were among the very first people to convert to Christianity, 2,000 years ago. And you paid a heavy price for that. You paid a heavy price under some of the Roman emperors, under the Arab invaders, the Ottoman Empire, under Islamists, right up to Morsi and his Muslim Brotherhood, mass persecution, discrimination other times, slaughter at other times, and the heavens are well and truly filled with Coptic martyrs, now saints in heaven. And I believe that when the second coming comes, when our blessed Lord comes back to earth, and when he does, every human eye will see it, every human heart will feel it. It'll be the coming together of yesterday, today and tomorrow. It'll be the end fulfillment of thousands of years of prophecy. When it does happen, and people have to give an account to themselves, the time of judgment, and when the Copts come, the Coptic faithful come before our blessed Lord and they say, "Take us, consider us for your kingdom, Lord," I believe that our Lord would say something like this to the Coptic Christians. I think that he would say, "I remember those thousands of years ago when I went with my beloved mother Mary and his chaste husband Joseph, and we fled from the cruelty of Herod, from certain death. It was the Egyptians, it was the Copts who gave us sanctuary. And I know that you have suffered over those centuries on my behalf and for the truth. You asked to come in. You are most welcome into my kingdom. You are most welcome into my kingdom. And you will be my Coptic faithful among the most exalted of the exalted in my kingdom." That's what I think will happen on that judgment day to the Coptic faithful for what they have suffered over these centuries and for what they have done. I have no doubt about that. Now, one of the miracles of our times is that here one of the oldest religious communities in the world who have suffered persecution on and off to varying degrees, but always discrimination in Egypt, that they have now spread throughout the world, as was pointed out earlier. Churches all over the world. We saw it on the film here, and this is a miracle of our times that this has happened. And we see here in Sydney, the metropolitan area, Newcastle, Wollongong, so forth. I think something like 70,000 Coptic Christians going back through, to the second, third, fourth generation here. That's a lot of people, a very strong outreach of the community. And I think it's very important what you are doing with the International Coptic Union to bring people together, because it's not only about, and the fact that you're talking about all Christians, because the truth is Christianity is officially the most persecuted religion in the world today. The most persecuted in the world today. And the persecutors come from various sides, North Korea and other communist countries, but overwhelmingly the persecution is coming at the hands of radical Islam, from the Islamists. There is no doubt about that. We should call a spade a spade. But what has happened is that whereas the Copts have experienced this persecution over many centuries, that persecution and attacks on Christianity has spread right throughout the world. Right throughout the world. So wherever you go in the world, you will see the same problem. If you go to the Philippines, you'll see they're at war with Catholics in that country, in the southern provinces. But if you go to Protestant Nigeria, you see with Kakabaran, I think that is the name of it. But whatever it is, an evil Islamist cult. They're at war with Protestants in that country. They're at war with the Orthodox in Russia. They're at war with Buddhists. We see that in Thailand. They're at war with Hindus and Sikhs on the Indian subcontinent. They're at war, of course, with the indigenous people of Egypt. They're at war with the indigenous people, the Assyrians in Iraq. They're at war with the people of Europe. You're a politician, in Holland, just as likely to be found one morning with your throat slit from ear to ear by an Islamist. That has been an occurrence that has occurred more than once or twice in that country. So all over the world we have this, and we have it here in Australia. Craig, I think you referred to some events here in Australia. You cannot pick up the papers in Sydney without reading something every day as to what is going on. I remember those riots in the streets of Sydney that Saturday morning 2 years ago when Islamists were rampaging through the streets of Sydney and getting in the way of shoppers and their children. And carrying those terrible signs calling for the beheading of those who criticise their prophet. And in fact, I was asked by the Government of New South Wales to move a motion in the Parliament condemning these attacks and this lawlessness by these Islamists, and it was carried unanimously by the Parliament of New South Wales. But we need to take further action. That's only just the start. I mean, we remember that there was a plot to assassinate the former Prime Minister of Australia, John Howard. We remember there was a plot that was foiled to let off a mass explosion at the football final at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. We remember attempts to poison our water supply. We know that some of them were out there training in terrorist tactics only a few months ago. And we have these thugs going back, most of them on disability pensions, might I add, or with criminal records for drug dealing and so forth, going back over to Iraq and Syria to involve themselves in executions and beheadings and crucifixions, including crucifixions of women and children. So these are people who are devils in human form. There's no other way to describe them. But we must remember this is now a worldwide war for civilization at the hands of these evil people. You know, it's funny because the very man who was plotting for somebody to be kidnapped in the streets of Sydney and publicly beheaded at Martin Place, that he was filmed a couple of years ago in Sydney carrying signs that says, you know, we love the prophet Jesus, read about it in the Quran. Well, you know, our Lord is not a prophet. He is the one that all true prophets talk about. He is the one who all true prophets talk about. When they say he is a prophet of God, no, he's not a prophet of God. He is God. And he certainly does not countenance the evil that these people are committing. So, Dr. Gerges and dear friends in the Coptic community, this is wonderful that you are now linked up in a formal way with Coptic communities right throughout the world to take this cause on, and people like Craig and myself and Fred Nile, I believe, is going to be coming here. We're all united behind you. And whatever we can do, we will do. When you ask us to come and speak, we're going to come and speak. We will do what we can in the Parliament of New South Wales, in the Parliament of Australia. Wherever we can have influence, we will have influence. And we're going to, this is a worldwide crusade. We wish you well, and at the end of the day, we're going to win through, so help us God. Thanks very much.
John Gregg Discounts used to be in Halden Street here in Canberra, so you know, obviously it's a bit of a mistake, but thank you so very much, Dr. Gerges, and for inviting me here, and Hanny, for asking me to come and to speak on behalf of the Australian Christian Nation Association. For those of you who don't know the Australian Christian Nation Association, it was started about in 2006 by the Reverend Fred Nile and a number of very concerned Middle Eastern people. And they saw that the greatest threat to the country wasn't so much the other nonsense that everyone has to carry on with that is going on in our world today, but it was this implementation of subversive Sharia law. And so Reverend Nile and these people began to get together with people of Middle Eastern descent and who have come to our shores to join together and support and to support them in what they do. When I was approached by Max Cracknell to join, I suggested that we would have a number of events that we should be highlighting. So in order to, to feature the benefits that our country has had, we need to show why our country is in the position that it's currently in. Because it just didn't happen because there was a bunch of really nice blokes that decided to come to Australia and it just all worked out and bingo, this is what we've got. It came about because of Bible-believing Christians. Everything good in our nation, in fact everything good in the world, is due to Bible-believing Christians who dig their heels in, who believe what the scriptures say, and who love one another and love their fellow man, love God first and foremost, and implement things that are being of benefit to the nation. One of the things I asked the Board of Acknett to consider doing was to commemorate the very first church service on Australian soil. And so that happened on the 3rd of February in 1788. Now I sat there and looked, in awe at the monastery that St. Anthony started in the 4th century. And of course we can't even compare to the history that the Coptic people have in Christianity. But nevertheless, that date for us is extremely important. It's extremely important because that was the date where every single person who came out on the first fleet actually attended church. And so the Reverend Richard Johnson, the chaplain of that particular time, stood up and opened up his Bible to Psalm 116 verse 12 and read the scriptures, "What shall I render unto the Lord for all his benefits unto me?" From that time, the Reverend Johnson suffered horribly, absolutely disgustingly at the hands of the government, and more especially at the hands of the military. And yet he persisted. And so we commemorate his life, we commemorate the work that he did, and we commemorate that very first church service. It's our hope that it would eventually be called Thanksgiving Day or Australian Thanksgiving Day. Because the answer to the question of what shall I render unto the Lord for all his benefits unto me came in verse 17, where it says, "And I shall offer up unto him a sacrifice of thanksgiving." And so it's a day in which Christians ought to come together. And so I would encourage you, if you are available on the 3rd of February every year, come to the corner of Bligh and Hunter Streets in the city, because we will be holding the commemorative service and we need supporters and Christians to come. The first year we had it, it was reported on the ABC, which was marvellous. And so, and the second year that we had it, quite a number of lunchtime people were standing around and listening to what was being said. We also had the Light Horse Charge on Bathsheba, of which Craig Kelly has been one of the greatest supporters of that event that we put on. And we so value Craig's office and the help that he does give on that day. So I really appreciate that, Craig, and I'm glad to be able to say this in front of everybody. But we need to know that the Coptic people will come and support. The Apostle Paul said that we are to rejoice with those who rejoice, we are to weep with those who weep. And one of the things that the Australian Christian Nation Association is committed to is to come and to support anything that the Coptic Association, the International Coptic Union, would be involved in. The very first time I met Hanny was at Martin Place at a Coptic rally. I went there because the Copts were copying it, you know, if I can use a cliche there. They were really copying it bad. And I thought, no, you don't understand it. No, I'll explain to you later. So the fact is that we were there to support. Whatever was needed, we were there to do. And so we would then say, because the Bible says that we are to submit to one another in love. And that's what I feel towards the Coptic people and towards the Christian church, is to submit to them in love, because it's by love that all men shall know that we are one in the Messiah. And so I thank you very much for having me here tonight. I would encourage you to talk to your children, come to our events that we have, because it's by upholding these events one, you'll learn about Australian history, and you'll learn about the great things that have been achieved and how they were achieved. But also, too, it shows support for other Christians as well. One of the things we need is for the, as my friend Samir Mansour says, we need the Anglo-Saxons, you know, with us. And so, but we need the Anglo-Saxons and the Coptics together. We need the Anglo-Saxons and the Assyrians together. We need the Anglo-Saxons and all the Nigerians, all the groups together. Because I know that in Christ, in the Messiah, we are really one. You know, at the end of the day, it's the love that we have towards one another, how we submit to one another in love. And so I would leave you with that as far as the Australian Christian Nation Association is concerned, we uphold Christian values first and foremost. Our first love is God Almighty and His Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. Our second love is to love our neighbour as ourselves. And so we wish to do that and extend it to the communities around about so that they can know and understand why this country is in the position that it's in. And as a very prominent speaker at our, and I don't know if I would use this person's name, but she said to me, oh sorry, I just gave it away. She said to me after one of our events, she said, if the Australian public doesn't get this, God help our country. And so I remember that coming from her, and I thought, well, she's a person who has been very influential in our country, seen a lot of things, but it's important that young people, that older people, come to understand the Bible, the truth in the Bible, and understand all these things, and then we can go on from there and have a much better society. God bless you, and thank you very much.
I would like to thank everybody for coming today. We enjoyed your company very much, and before I conclude, I would like to thank Hani Gayet, Dr. Mr. Ashraf Ibrahim, Dr. Rafa Ibrahim, Mr. Matthew Awera, Peter. Without the help of these people, we would not have been able to be today in this function. So I thank them very much.
We thank you.
I also would like to thank Sandra and her staff about the help they gave us in arranging this function. Now I call on Hani.
As we come to the end of our function, I want to thank everyone shared with us this night, and I would ask our coordinator in Australia, Dr. Rafa, Mr. Ashford, to come here with Mr. Maggie. Peter. First, we want to ask Mr. Greg Kelly to come, because we want to thank you for all this year. You help and support our community, the Coptic, in many occasions, and we want to give you a present. This is the original from our country. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Second, we ask Hon David Clark to come. We want to thank him for all his years to support and help our community, the Coptic people, and we give you a present. to defend a lot of things in our society as Christianity and freedom. We want to thank him for all his years in service our community and our church. Second, we want to thank Mr. Safwat Tadros from our community for the years which he spent it to serve our community in many years as helping the poor in our country, for sending a lot of stuff without making a propaganda. We want to thank him for all with his wife for many years. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We want to thank Mr. Samir Habashi for years for presenting the Coptic issue in his newspaper. We want to thank him for. Thank you, Mr. Samir. At last, we want to thank Mr. Mikhail. Come on, please. Mr. Mikhail is one of the Coptic which is helpful in the media and technology in a lot of stuff. We want to thank him for his coming today and sharing with us this time. Thank you, sir.